Okay, in the last video I said talk to you later. Well, now is later because I want to go ahead and continue talking about this message right now. So I was talking about how it's really helpful to sit for hours in contemplation and in focused attention on the self each day, and I do that. That's one reason why I haven't made videos in a year. I've been very engaged in sitting in that chair for hours every day, being focused on the self. And this draws me towards the magnet of the self, and it helps me to realize more and more that the self that I seem to be sitting in contemplation with, that's what I am. And it is weakening the attachment or the belief to the false self. But the problem becomes, again, that often when we get up out of that chair and we begin to move about in the world, interacting with the world, that our attention is naturally drawn back towards the world, which then again begins to strengthen the idea of the false self as what I am. And so this is where surrender comes in helpful. Although I appear to be moving around and interacting with the world, I don't have to be thinking about the world. I can use the tools of mantra to keep me away from daydreaming and mind wandering and keep me focused on the self. And I can use the tool of surrender to help me be aware of my intuitive prompts of what I need to do without listening to mental chatter talking about what appears to need to be done. It's really funny because it's kind of like being between full belief in the world and being between realization of the self. It's really a bridge, which I've talked about before. It's living on the bridge, but living on the bridge is a wonderful place to be right now because the bridge is moving me towards the self. I'm going to continue now with the message, the circus and the meadow. When the mind is not occupied in the silence of the mantra, let it be used for the purpose of surrender. This way, the mind is always used purposefully. You ready for this next cute little line? This way, the mind is always used purposefully in either surrender or mantra when we're up out of our chair, right, not in contemplation. And one's toes will wiggle and curl delightfully as they feel the coolness of the meadow's ground beneath them. Surrender of the common practices of the day, such as what to eat and what to wear, when to sleep, what to say, and when to speak. Surrender of such practices is letting go of ego, because the ego indulges itself, its sense of self, through ordinary practices such as these. It's not really the act of, the seeming act of eating or putting on clothes or speaking that strengthens the ego. It's all of that thinking and all of that self-identification and all of that attachment about eating and what to wear and where to go and what to say and conversations. All of that thinking is what strengthens the sense of self. So mantra and surrender are tools that help to reduce that thinking, therefore help to reduce that attachment. Even after following a practice of surrender, this is kind of important. This is really pointing out some of the ego tricks that that the false self, the mind, will throw in even as we try to follow this bridge of using the mantra and surrender. Even after following a practice of surrender, mind will want to think about that practice. It will want to be proud for listening and following. I'm so proud of myself now because I'm engaged in surrender. Or it will want to analyze the meaning of the act you were guided to follow. I wonder why I was guided to start those inner Ramana videos again. I wonder if it's because of this or this, right? Thinking about that. Or it will want to imagine the results. I wonder what the benefit is of suddenly restarting these inner Ramana videos. Or I wonder what the benefit is of this change of diet I seem to be undergoing as a result of surrender and just acting. It wants to think about, so if we're not thinking about what shall I eat or should I start the inner Ramana's videos again, instead we're not thinking, we feel the prompt and we notice the following, then it wants to think about the following. And again, the only purpose of this thinking is to strengthen attachment to the false, strengthen the belief that I am this false body, mind, personality, and I actually live in a world. That's the only purpose of this thinking. Or it might even want to imagine, it's continuing with these ego tricks here about if we surrender, it might even want to imagine the impact of my surrender, how important, or how nobody's going to listen to these videos, right? It wants to think about the impact of whatever action I've been guided to take. Or another one is it might want to imagine the next step. So what happens after I finish this series of Inner Ramana videos? What am I going to do next? So see how it wants to get engaged in thinking, even if I'm using surrender to guide my apparent actions. And again, remember, the reason I'm using surrender to guide my apparent actions is to reduce thinking. Well, if I'm not thinking about what my actions are going to be, then it just wants to bring in thinking about surrender. So we really have to be aware that all thinking is an ego trick. Ego trick meaning all thinking is there to increase my attachment to the false self and the false world. And remember, the purpose of the tools of mantra and surrender are to reduce that thinking that strengthens that attachment. So when I see my thinking about my surrender wanting to come in, I want to recognize that for what it is and return to the mantra. And the mantra which points me back towards the stillness, away from the thinking. All right, I'm going to stop there for right now. There's a little more to this message, but I'm going to stop there. And I just want to share with you some of the quotes that I was reading this morning in this book called The 7 Steps to Awakening during my own personal contemplation time over there in that chair. All right, so it looks like I was looking at around quotes 652 and 653. All of the quotes in this book are numbered. And I just look at a few every day, and they guide my contemplation. So the quotes today, all right, here's 652 and 653. Listen to how they support this video and the previous one. Pursuing the inquiry into its real nature, the mind abandons its identification even with the body. Now, so far in Inner Ramana, we've been looking at 2 tools, the mantra and surrender. But later in Inner Ramana, we are going to look at self-inquiry. These are the 3 tools that are taught through this teaching. All 3 tools are guided to point us inward, away from the world and away from thought. And so what 652 is saying, which is actually a quote from the Supreme Yoga, pursuing the inquiry into its real nature, which means turning the attention inward, the mind abandons its identification even with the body. And then the next quote, 653, when the mind gets involved in the external object universe, it moves away from the self. So notice the 2 quotes I was contemplating this morning from the Supreme Yoga are saying the same thing. The more time I spend focused inward towards the true self, the more my attachment to the belief in the false self and the world is weakened. The more time I spend focused outward towards thoughts and towards the world, the more that attachment to the false is strengthened. So these practices that we're learning through the teaching of Inner Ramana, so far the practices of mantra and surrender, are there to help us weaken that attachment to the false. And as we weaken that attachment to the false and get drawn in towards ourself, we're moving across the bridge from illusion to self-realization. And I'd love to talk about this more, but instead I think I'm going to end this video and I'm going to go back to my chair and just spend more time in contemplation of this myself. And when I do get up and move about today, I want to stay in that contemplation through mantra and surrender, and I hope you will join me. Okay, I gotta go.